So what our reports are showing that at the moment, the 2013 figures that we have, total global climate finance has equaled 331 billion US dollars. But that's a fall for the second consecutive year, and even more importantly, it falls far short of what's needed. And just at one point of comparison, the International Energy Agency, estimates that you need about $1 trillion US dollars per year to actually get the energy sector alone on low carbon pathway. So we do see that there is a gap, an investment gap. Don't think that the problem is the finance, that the missing capital out there. There is capital, but there is a gap. And as we have, falling figures for a couple of years now, the gap, actually, the cumulative gap is broadening, which means that it's, we're falling further and further behind, and we are putting some of the agreed temperature goals at risk, and also, increasing the likelihood of some dangerous impacts.
And we're here at a carbon markets, carbon pricing conference. I mean, rather like a sort of great footballer who's always injured on the sidelines, but the sort of fans still think it can pull some magic out of a random game. Markets are always talked of, but so far, I think it's fair to say they haven't necessarily kind of delivered. Do you think is it important to have some reference for these in a Paris deal? Is it going to be important that their potential is recognised? And I guess the second part of that question is what role do you think they will play in the overall finance package?
Very good point, but let me maybe just make a step back and again show where we are at the moment. So from the vast majority of the current global climate finance is actually coming from the private sector. So we have about 60%, a little bit more than 60% of the overall 331, which is coming from the private sector, while the public sector still does have a really important role, and public actors and intermediaries are actually kind of the engine behind lots of the international climate finance. They are kind of bridging liability gaps, taking off the risks for something like the actors at this conference here, where we then really see they need to have kind of stable policy environments. They need to have certainty in order to really, get the private sector inside, which is the way to close the gap. So in terms of markets, what we need is certainly to ensure that we, unlock more pools of capital. We need carbon pricing signals. They're explicit, implicit. Carbon markets play a role of that. They have not, between the Secretary General's high-level finance group, the AGF report in 2010, and now they have not materialized as we had expected them to materialize. I do think that they have given market signals. We certainly have experience in Europe that has happened. I do think in the context of the Paris deal, what will matter is really understanding how the different actors can scale up finance, but how we can actually unlock new pools of capital, which is more like groups like institutional investors, which is how can we learn the lessons from the climate investment funds for actually the emerging green climate fund. What is it that's working? Where do we need more action? What's the technologies, the regions that are really lacking behind, also in terms of the needs that we see there? In total, I do think we need to really understand what's the ways, approaches, sources, innovative instruments that are out there or that we need to develop to really fill the gap from a variety of, with a variety of tools and from a variety of actors.
I mean, you couldn't say that the perceived sort of slowdown in climate finance has been because there are not enough development banks. Every month there seems to be a new development bank opening. I mean, I'm not going to say are there too many, but it seems from that perspective that there is a healthy kind of network out there of providers, isn't there? So what is there one single thing that's blocking this, or is it just a case of that naturally funds move slower than policy? Or
well, just on the development banks, and actually we see that 38% of all the climate finance currently is being managed, raised, and distributed by development finance institutions. So they are very important actors. I do think what we need to understand better is how we can address the needs of investors from different types of the private sector in order to scale up. So I think, the public funds, there is a natural scarcity of public funds out there. There will be obviously, sure that there will be some, development, some progress there. But if we really want to get on a low carbon climate resilient pathway, we do need to kind of understand how we can tap into the other pools. And there, again, our work shows that we have about 3/4 of all climate finance flows are domestic at the moment, which means that they're invested in the same country in which they're originating from. And in the context of private investment, it's even 90%. And that shows private investors really prefer environments which are more familiar and also perceived to be less risky. And that in turn really puts a lot of importance to developing domestic policy frameworks. That's really, we got to get that right in order to ensure that there's the right enabling environment for the private sector to come in and scale up.